your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Stand in your love. Standing in your love. Amen. Let's take a moment. Let's greet each other in the Lord this morning. It is awesome to be here at the house of the Lord this morning. Amen. It's great to be back with you guys and to be able to worship and just offer up tithes and offerings and be able to celebrate communion and celebrate and worship and a message. And it's just something that can help us get rejuvenated for this week and be able to rest in God and stand in His love. So thank you guys so much for taking time out of your morning to be a part of this. We welcome everybody here on Facebook and in YouTube land, and just hope that this message and this of worship this morning and that Tim's going to bring just brings warmth to your heart and that you're uplifted by it. There's a lot of things going on in the life of the church, so make sure you guys just check out our Facebook page. We got a lot of things going on there. We had a really awesome event last week for the community, and I know we're going to look forward to doing more things like that in the months to come. So be watching out for that, and volunteers and everybody is just greatly appreciated. Step up and help out because I know that it's a cool way that we can minister to this community. Also, I think this Thursday we're actually going down to the tap room again, and we're going to play a worship set and some music down there from 7 to 9. Yeah. So it's going to be a fun time. It was cool. The last time we played, it's really neat to go down there and be able to minister in a way that's unconventional. There were people dancing and worshiping to the song we just sang right there. So it's just really cool to be able to go into an environment and be able to be a positive influence, and maybe in a way that most churches wouldn't dare to go to. But if you look at Jesus' ministry, actually where he proclaimed his church was basically at the gates of hell, where the worst place that he could possibly be. He was with sinners, he was with saints, and we want to go out and we want to be the church, not just the church people, but to those that hear the message of love and hope. The way that we're doing that, the way that we're able to outreach is through offering our tithes and offerings. We've been able to help a lot of people in this church specifically and in the community, just in the life of this church. And based on your willingness to give back what God has graciously given you. So we're going to take some time. We're going to worship with our tithes and offerings right now, and we're going to keep praying and profess our love for you. Listen.
Can you see us just dancing?
I count on one thing. The same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now. And in the waiting, the same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy for all my days. Oh yes, I will. Well, I count on one thing. The same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now. In the waiting, same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy for all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names that nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. And yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy for all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will. Yes, you take time to celebrate to remember the sacrifice that Jesus gave us. When he went upon the cross and suffered and let him die for our sins. He rose again on the third day, conquering death and defeating death. We eat the bread that represents his body that was broken on the cross, and we drink the blood that represents his blood that was There's a story in the Gospels that talks about when Jesus healed the paralytic. Crowds had gathered all around Jesus because of the wondrous things he was doing. Some friends wanted their buddy healed so bad that they had a hole in the roof and lowered him down where Jesus was healing people. Because of their At that time, all the Pharisees were gathered around were really upset with what Jesus said. He said, "Who is this man that has the ability to heal someone?" This is the first time that he's actually been healed. And he told the man to take up his mat and walk. He told the Pharisees it was easier to say your sins are forgiven or to take up your mat and go. The Pharisees were looking at Jesus from a worldly perspective and didn't see him in a godly light. The fact that Jesus has the ability to forgive our sins. The sin that made this man crippled. The sin that lives in our hearts. The sin that makes us do things that we don't want to do on a daily basis, but we still do them. Jesus offers us grace. He offers us mercy. And this grace covers our sins. Grace is something that we don't deserve. It's what He gives us our sins. He had no sin. He's that power of grace on us.
are better than all these things.
And celebrate.
Your love is better than life. You are the well that won't run dry. I have tasted and I have seen. You are better than all these things. Oh, your love is better than life. You are the well that won't run dry. I have tasted and I have seen. You are better than all these things. Being liked and loved by everyone. Approval that outshines the sun. Cheered by all who think of me. You are better than all these things. You are better than all these things.
There is hallelujah in the presence of my enemy.
I have tasted and I have seen.
I raise hallelujah. Louder than the unbelief. I raise hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. And I raise hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. There is hallelujah with everything inside of me. I raise hallelujah. I will watch the darkness flee. I raise hallelujah. In the middle of God, we raise our hallelujahs this morning. We lift our banner high to the one, the only that gave it all for us, Jesus. Thank you so much for the gift of your Son, for giving us that freedom, for allowing us to sing a little bit louder for that freedom, for allowing us to lift our voice to you in our praise and honor to you. You're our Father, and we give you all the glory and all the honor and all the praise. We raise our hallelujah to you. It's in your Son's name, Jesus. And I raise a hallelujah. 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 Amen. You guys can have a seat.
Keys today. I'm going to play my own background music. So when it gets loud and crazy, I'll start screaming. Ah! Young people, let me tell you something. Ryan, it's good to have you back. I mean, we had good people last week, but it's good to have you back. I think Adam did a great job, but dang, you're pretty. So good jeans, skinny jeans. Adam will tell you that every pair of jeans he wears are skinny jeans. Whether he intended on them being or not. Hey guys, so this is Labor Day weekend, so I'm glad that you guys are here. That means either you guys don't have a boat, or have a friend that owns a boat, or maybe have friends at all. I don't know, because you guys aren't out doing anything this weekend, right? So you have to hang with me, and I am both excited about that and sorry for that all at the same time. And so we're in the second week of a series that I'm calling Slaying Giants, and we're talking about some of those things in our lives that are both huge and kind of cast a big shadow over us, but also fly under the radar of the people around us. And so obviously you have like the 7 deadly sins, and this isn't necessarily that, but there are some other things like insecurity and self-doubt and anxiety and maybe even depression as we dive a little deeper into this. But today, the giants that I want to talk about slaying are self-doubt and insecurity. And I admitted last week that I fight with that some myself. And it's hard not to play the comparison game. It's hard not to allow the things you have done from your past or the things that have been done to you in your past to define who you are. And so we're just going to take some steps, and all of this is kind of coming from my observation out of the good old story of David and Goliath. And so we're hitting these different giants from one story of a young man fighting a literal giant. So so that's what we're in. So everyone has a story, right? Everyone has a backstory. If you're sitting here today, there have been these moments, these seasons, these chapters, if you will, that have led up to you being here right now. And I don't believe that that's an accident. I believe that you are here on purpose, with a purpose, and for a purpose. I believe that our backstories make us unique, and I think that's the beauty of the gospel, because the gospel meets each of us individually in our backstories, right? The gospel is basically that collision of your backstory with the redemption story of Jesus, which is a beautiful thing, which is an amazing thing. And anyone who has met Jesus and been impacted by his redeeming love has a testimony. And that testimony is basically kind of how that backstory and the gospel hammers out together. But one thing I hate, in like 18 years of youth ministry, I ran into this a few times, and there was one time in particular that really kind of chapped my cheeks. It's when somebody has like a crazy backstory, all right? And then they say, I met Jesus and everything is perfect now. Because I feel like that's a bit misleading, right? I had a youth group at a concert. It was one of the biggest Christian bands at the time. And I say Christian bands. I don't even really believe in Christian music. I believe in Christian people who make music, but I don't believe in Christian music. So I don't think Jesus hung on the cross and was like, somebody's getting a Grammy for this one, right? I don't believe in that. But I was at this concert, and the lead singer of this band talked, and he's getting into this testimony, and all of a sudden he's like, I used to spend $700 a day on my cocaine addiction, and then I met Jesus, and everything is perfect now. And so I've got these kids who are looking around. They're like, all I need to do is give my life to Jesus, and my life will be perfect. All the while, they're going home to broken homes, or homes that are in turmoil, or they're going home to situations and circumstances that aren't perfect. And I feel like sometimes that's very misleading. And so our backstory is just what brought us to the point. We still have a battle that we're fighting from that point on. And I think that's something that we need to understand, because our reality is not, I met Jesus and everything is perfect. Now, all the bad crap in our life is perfected because of who Jesus is, but everything's not perfect. I'll be the first person to tell you, because I'm as jacked up as they come. I'm the most jacked up person in this room right now. I promise. Test me. Anyone with a backstory probably has some baggage that comes along with that backstory, right? And this baggage is something, it is to be overcome. It's something that we can overcome, this baggage that comes up as a part of your backstory. But let's admit it, it's not always easy to overcome that baggage. It's not always easy just to push that stuff out and be like, okay, from this point forward, I'm not thinking about the abuse. Or I'm not thinking about the self-doubt. Or I'm not thinking about what was done to me, or the byproduct, or the fallout from what I've done. I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to push all that out of my life. In reality, it's not impossible, but it's very improbable, all right, if we're just being real here. And so that baggage often breeds a self-doubt and an insecurity. And those are some pretty big giants. And once you keep feeding those giants, they keep growing for some reason. That baggage has a way of reminding us of the fact that we're not good enough, or that our backstory is our identity, and that there's no way to escape that backstory, right? So if you were a screw-up all through your teenage years, then you're just going to remain that screw-up that you were from your teenage years, and there's no redemption from that. But I want to say this as we dive into these points, okay? Every time that Satan reminds you of your past, I think you need to remind him of his future. Because God's going to come down hard on that dude. He is. And it's going to be rough for him. And so whenever he tries to dangle that snapshot of the worst moment of your life in front of your face, you need to remind him that that's your past, but his future is going to really, really suck for him. Really bad. Right? And so as we dive a little deeper into this story of David and Goliath, his backstory and the people in his life tried to keep him from fighting his giants. Okay? Even though God had already told him who he was, his backstory and the people in his life are trying to keep him from fighting this giant. And so the first thing I think we need to remember whenever we approach fighting our giants, these giants of insecurity, these giants of self-doubt, is, in the words of the great theologian Taylor Swift, haters gonna hate. Hate, 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 right? Haters gonna hate. And so, I think this, misery loves company. And so haters are always going to hate. Misery loves company. When you make a decision to fight your giants, you'll always have people who don't understand why you're trying to fight those giants. You'll always have people who don't understand why you're going to put the mental margin, why you're going to put the energy, why you're going to put the focus and the purpose into fighting these giants. You'll have people who don't want to see you succeed. Why? Because misery loves company. You'll also have people who genuinely care about you, but they're afraid that you're going to lose to this giant, and it's going to make things worse. Then you'll have people who are just jealous and want to see you lose, or those people that tuck tail and run, and now here you are standing by yourself, seemingly, to fight your giants alone, right? You're going to have people that don't understand. You're going to have haters. Anytime you try and progress past where people think you should be, you're going to have people that hate on that. Anytime your vision is bigger than bigger than the box that people put you in, you're going to have haters. That's going to happen. This happened with David. 1 Samuel 17:28. It says, "But when David's oldest brother Eliab heard David talking to the men, he was angry." He says, "What are you doing around here anyway?" he demanded. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see battle. You just want to see the battle. He says, "Don't you remember where you came from? You're just a shepherd boy. What the heck are you doing here anyways? This is where the real men hang. This is where the men are. You're just a little boy. You're supposed to be protecting a couple sheep." He's reminding him of what his backstory is. He's reminding him of who he is. He's putting him in the box that he thinks that he should be. This was his way, Eliab's way of saying to David, go back to where you came from. Your best days are behind you. Go back to where you came from. But the thing is that David already had a call in his life before the giant even showed up. God already told him who he was before the giant even showed up. You see, even before this, Samuel anointed David as the future king of Israel. David knew where he was going, but his brother wanted to keep him where he was. And we're going to have people in our lives that want to fight us knowing where we're going, and they want to keep us where we were because that allows them to stay where they are. Does that make sense? Because once we start becoming a better person, a more purposeful person, a more righteous person, then all of a sudden things are different. And then you've got people like Eliab saying to David, "Man, you've really changed." And sometimes whenever they say you've really changed, that's not a great thing. But whenever you change for the better and people say that, it's a good thing. It's because they've taken notice that you're going somewhere beyond where they intend for you to be. That's typically born out of their own insecurity, right? And let me tell you something. Life is hard enough. Like, is there anybody here that agrees with me that life is a little tough? Yeah? Like 4 of you? Any of you that didn't raise your hand, I need to have lunch with you. You can coach me. I'll pay you. You can just tell me what it's like and how, like the tips to have a life that doesn't suck sometimes. You know, life's hard enough with our own stuff we're dealing with. It is. Parenting is hard. Kids ruin everything. Right? Marriage is hard. I'm always wrong about everything. Yeah. Paying bills is hard. Because I want to do stuff that I want to do. I want to buy shoes and go to Disney World. But apparently we need like water and electric and stuff, and that's ridiculous. But if you begin living your life based off of other people's giants too, then it's going to be about impossible, right? You've got to fight your giants, and you've got to be the cheering section for other people fighting their giants, but you can't fight other people's giants, and people can't fight your giants for you. It has to be defined by you, and it has to be fought by you. We need to understand that people aren't going to understand the giants that we're fighting. Now, I'm going to ask for a little bit of transparency here. How many of you guys would say that you fight a little bit of self-doubt and insecurity as well? Anybody? Okay. More people than I thought. We're all jacked up. Maybe we should just stay in this room and never leave ever again, right? The thing about it is you guys fight the same thing that I fight, but you have to fight it differently because of who you are and the backstory that brought you to this point. Your mom and your dad have an effect on how you fight your giants. The school you went to, the sports you played, or the fact that you didn't play any sports, or your hobbies and your interests and the people that cross paths in your life, they kind of help you become the person that you are in order to fight the giants that you fight. And I can't relate to that because my backstory is really jacked up, right? And it has me fighting things in a way that you guys may not understand, but I'm fighting my giants in the way that I'm equipped, right? They could be the same giants, but because of our backstory, it looks totally different. So haters are going to hate. They're going to hate because they're jealous. They're going to hate because they don't care about you. They might hate because they do care about you and they're worried you're going to lose. Or they might just hate because they're going through the same things and they don't understand why you're fighting the giant the way you're fighting the giant. But we fight that giant the way we're fighting the giant because of number two. Because we got to play the cards that we're dealt. Whenever I went through talking about my generation, I love talking about the 1940s. I love talking about the greatest generation. That generation that endured World War II and then came home and played the cards that they were dealt. That generation who graduates high school, expects to start a family, but all of a sudden they find themselves on the other side of the earth being shot at. And then whenever they come home, they get back to it. They build industry. They create an environment for their children to experience the 50s that was a pretty fun time for them. You see, we have to play the cards that we're dealt. We can't play other people's cards, and people can't play our cards, right? As a matter of fact, later on in this chapter, in verses 33 through 40, Saul is talking to David here because David's like, I'll fight the dude. I got this. And they're thinking, you're like a 5-foot-something teenager, and you're going to fight a 9-foot giant? Really? And he says this. He says, don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. Like he was built to fight. Goliath, he was that kid that was bigger than everybody. So somebody's like, the boy needs to play basketball. And that's what they do. It's nothing but basketball, nothing but basketball, nothing. He was freaking Shaquille O'Neal, all right? That's what he was. There was no chance that Shaquille O'Neal wasn't going to play basketball, right? He's huge. And so they found out what he was going to do and what he was going to be good at, and they programmed him to do this. And it just so happened that he was a Philistine warrior, all right? But David persisted. He said, well, I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. And I imagine Saul is thinking, sheep, goats, giant? Is there something going on here? Are you smoking crack or something? Because there's a big difference between sheep and goats and a giant, right? And he said, when a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. And if the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. Okay, so I don't know that I would ever do that for a lamb or a goat. I don't know if my man card should be taken away or what. But when you grab a bear by the jaw and beat it to death, that's pretty cool. That's another one of those scenes that need to be in this movie. He said, and I'll do this to the pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. And the Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, he said. And may the Lord be with you. Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail. And David put it on and strapped the sword over it and took a step or two to see what it was like. For he had never worn such things before. I can't go in these, he protested to Saul. I'm not used to them. These aren't the cards that I've been dealt, right? So David took them off again, and he picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into a shepherd's bag. And then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and a sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. With the cards that he was dealt, with the things that he learned, with the stuff that developed him to this point in his life from his backstory. Right? It looked different because you have 2 armies of people that have swords, that have spears, that have armor, that have all this stuff on, and you've got this little kid out there with a sling and a stick and 5 rocks. Right? We remember why 5 rocks? Because historians think that Goliath had 4 brothers, so he was going to kick 4 butts, not just one. 4 really big butts, and he cannot lie. All right? So little tiny teenage David says, I got this, and Saul literally told him not to be ridiculous. He said, you're ridiculous. But David persisted to fight his giant. He explained his cards. He was a shepherd. I know what it's like to take care of my people. God has been training me to take care of his people by the fact that I've been taking care of sheep, my father's sheep. I've led this flock of sheep and made sure that they were fed, made sure they were nourished, and that they were well rested, and made sure that nothing came in to eat them, right? And now I'm going to do the same for my father's people, for God's people in the future, right? He explains that he fought big animals, like stuff that we would run from. He says, I don't run from danger, I run to the danger. I run into the roar because I know that's where the danger's at. And I'm going to fight it and make sure that what I'm supposed to be taken care of is taken care of. And then he talked about how he fought. He says, I'm going to grab a bear by its mouth and shut him up. Right? This is Goliath taunting God's people, and he says, I'm just going to grab him by the mouth and shut him up. Right? I'm going to grab him by his jaw and beat him to death. I think that we need a t-shirt that just says Falls City Christian Church. Grab him by the jaw and beat him to death. Yeah? Yeah? I like that. And so Saul tries to give him his armor, and it didn't fit. Why didn't it fit? Because it wasn't his. All right? It didn't fit. My son Cooper, there's no way I'm fitting into his jeans. Nick Spray, there is no way I'm fitting into that dude's jeans. I'd look like a busted can of biscuits. But you can't play somebody else's hand. And you can't fight somebody else's giant. So David says, I'll play my cards, which are a stick and a sling at this point in time. And he was confident in what he had for a couple of reasons. Number one, he knew God was on his side. God had already anointed him king, and he hasn't become king yet, so he knows his story is not over. He knows his backstory has brought him to this point, but the best is yet to come for him. Like his future is still wide open. So he knows that God is on his side. And also, he had been fighting with these things all of his life, right? It's a part of who he is. It's a part of his backstory. He's more confident in a stick and a sling because that's what he's been using his entire life. These are the tools that he used to train for this battle against his giant, right? And we all have these different tools that we've used to train in this battle against our giants. One of my favorite tools, one of my favorite weapons is sarcasm. Sarcasm is my love language. I think there's 6 love languages. The author just forgot that sarcasm is one of them. They didn't look like the weapons of the time. They didn't look like the weapons for the job. They didn't look like the weapons for battle, but they got the job done, right? David played the cards that he was dealt instead of using what everybody else thought he should use. That's what made his backstory and him unique to the situation. I mean, there are thousands of men with armor and clubs and swords and spears that will not take on this giant. And he steps up and says, I'll do it, but I'm going to do it the way that God created me to do it. And that's against the status quo. And a lot of times when you're against the status quo and you're playing the cards that you're dealt, haters are going to hate. Aren't they? They are. And the last thing you need to know whenever you're facing your giants is that you are your Father's child. You are your Father's child. Like David knew that God was in his corner. He is his Father's child. In verse 46 it says, "Today the Lord will conquer you." He's saying this to Goliath. He didn't say, "Today I'm about to whip your butt." He says, "No, today the Lord will conquer you." And I love this. Then he says, "And I will kill you and cut off your head." He said, God's going to conquer you, but I am going to fillet you. God's going to conquer you, but I am going to kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that I am awesome. Is that what it says? No. It says, and the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. He says, the reason that this is going down is because I am my Father's child. Yeah, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to cut off your head, but not until my Father has done what He's going to do through this situation. You see, we need to realize that we're not in this alone, that we have our Heavenly Father that is fighting for us against our giants of insecurity, against our giants of self-doubt, against our giants of anxiety, against our giants of anything that is casting a shadow over our lives and trying to whoop our tail. David knew who would conquer the giant. It wasn't him. His job wasn't to conquer the giant. His job was to kill it. His job wasn't to conquer the giant. His job was to cut his head off and parade his head around for everybody to see that there is a God in Israel. I love the way he says it. The Lord will conquer you, but I'm going to kill you. He's saying, God's going to whoop your tail, then I'll come and take your lunch money. That's kind of what he's saying, right? God's going to beat you up. God's going to knock you out. Then I'm going to take your lunch money. And everybody's going to know that you're all talk. Everybody's going to know that you don't have anybody in your corner that's fighting your battles for you. He's saying, my job isn't to conquer you. My job is to kill you. God's going to conquer you. God's going to put my fear to rest. God's going to put my anxiety to rest. God's going to deal with my insecurities, and then I am going to kill them so that they can't come back. God's going to conquer them, right? David knew who he was. He knew he was a shepherd boy, just a shepherd boy. That's to look after sheep and goats, right? He knew that he had fought lions and bears. He knew that these dumb animals couldn't outsmart him. And if they could outsmart him, he knew what to do to bring them to submission and then beat their head in. Do you guys not agree that this would make a really cool movie? I don't know. Might be like a bro date night, right? I don't know if the ladies are into that kind of gore and blood and nastiness. He knew he was the son of Jesse. He knew he was the youngest of 8 boys. He knew that he had 7 big brothers that were going to tax his gig every time that they got a chance. He knew that he was the future king, right? But the big power came when he knew who he belonged to. When he knew whose child he was. He might be the son of Jesse, but he's a child of God. All right? He might be the son of some poor guy who has a small farm and a handful of sheep, but he is a child of God. He might be just like you. He might be the person that's just plugging away hour by hour to try and make ends meet, who has some kids that you're trying to keep not going off the deep end, who are having issues in your marriage, who are just trying not to have it all fall apart, who's fighting insecurity and anxiety and just your day-to-day reality. But what you need to know today is that even though all of that is real in your life, one thing that's even more real in your life is that you are a child of God. And when you're a child of God, He'll do some tail whipping for you. He will conquer the things that need to be conquered. You just kill them. He will whoop them. You just take their lunch money and let them know who is boss, which is not you, unless you're God. And if you are, then thanks for coming to our church this morning. That's really cool. I'm flattered. And that's easy to remember when everything's going okay, that you are a child of God and everything's good. But what about when it's not? Or what about when we screw up? Or what about when we have a hard time believing that God even wants us to be His child? Because we've messed up, or we're inconsistent, or because of our inadequacies. It reminds me of a story in the New Testament. It's Jesus is telling a story about the prodigal son, okay? And a lot of you guys have heard about the prodigal son, and what happens is the dad here has a lot of land. He's got mad camels and stuff and whatever other cool toys that rich farmers have back then. And the younger son comes up to Dad and he says, Dad, I want my cut now. I've got this really good opportunity. I'm going to go into the city. I'm going to start a small business. I'm going to call it Starbucks. I think it's going to get really, really big. No, I don't think it was Starbucks. I think Starbucks didn't come until a little later than that. But he says, I want my money now so I can go into the city and start the life that I've always wanted to start. And he goes in and he starts to spend his money and probably has some friends that are around because he's buying drinks, right? And then all of a sudden, the economy takes a dive, and he's losing his money, and all of a sudden, he's the one that needs drinks bought for him, but his friends aren't around anymore. So he's freaking out, and he goes to work for a pig farmer, and it gets so bad that he's even considering eating the pig slop. And he has this thought. He's like, dang, my dad's servants even eat better than this. They have a place to sleep. They're better taken care of than what I'm being taken care of. Maybe I can go back and Dad will let me be his servant. And so he's probably walking between the pig farm and the house, kicking rocks down the road, thinking, oh my gosh, is he even, he's going to say, I told you so. I know he's going to say, I told you so. And I know I'm going to have to be a servant. And not only am I going to have to be a servant, but the other servants are going to hate on me because I screwed everything up, right? And then we pick it up here in verse 20. In Luke 15, verse 20, it says, so he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, the father saw him coming. The father saw him coming while he's a long way off. What do you think that means? He was watching for him, right? The father was watching for him to come back. He was sitting on the front porch. He was waiting. And he was watching the end of the gravel lane. And all of a sudden, he sees dust kicked up at the end of the gravel lane. And he gets excited, right? And filled with what? Love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. Here's the thing. Filled with love and compassion, I get that. I'm a dad, right? I'm having a hard time with this he ran to his son thing. Because man boobs don't allow me to do that as much anymore. Muffin top, it's not good for running down the lane, right? But also, in this point in time in history, a Jewish male did not run. There wasn't anything worth hurrying over. It was something that men just didn't do. Like men don't cry, right? I'm a sucker. I cry all the time. Man, that moment in Little Mermaid, whenever Triton marries off Ariel, gets me every time. I get choked up. Or whenever Simba's dad dies, when Mufasa dies, if you don't cry at that, you don't have a soul. I'm just saying. But anyways, he picks up his man skirt, if you will, and he takes off running down the lane, doing something that Jewish men aren't supposed to do, because he was so excited to see his son. And instead of saying, I told you so, instead of saying, where were you, instead of saying, where's all the money, instead of saying, you screwed up, he embraced him and kissed him. He said, his son said to him, Father, I have sinned against you and heaven, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. But his father interrupted him. His father was so excited to see him that he even wouldn't let him get his apology out. Can you imagine how many times the prodigal son practiced his apology on his way home? The perfect wording. He's like, I'm going to say this. It's Dad. I know what's going to hit him right in the heart, and everything's going to be good. But he wouldn't even, he was squeezing him too hard to even let him get his apology out. And he says to the servant, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. The father was looking for him. He ran. He embraced him. He kissed him. The son began to apologize, but he couldn't get it all out. And this is what the father does. He says, I need you to go and get the finest robe to throw over him. Why? Because he was filthy. He was skanky, right? He's been hanging out with pigs. He's been walking on dirt roads. He's trying to get home. He's probably been on like a 2-month bender because he had the money to be on a bender, and now he doesn't have the money to be on. He's looking rough, and he says, I need to cover up your filth. Isn't that what God does for us? Isn't that what God does for his children? He sends his son to die. We just took communion. The wine represents the blood, and that is the robe that covers up our filth. That is the robe that takes away the dirt and the grime and the shame and the sin that we're walking around with, kicking rocks, trying to come up with a good apology. And then he says, put a ring on his finger. Well, what's the significance to that? If you are poor, what do you need a ring for? Well, this ring is a signet ring. You see? It's a ring that tells everybody who he is and whose he is. It gives him an identity. It says he's a part of my family, he's my son, and he's going to be treated as my child. Not a servant, not a visitor, not a sojourner, not a foreigner, nothing like that. He says, this is my son. He's mine. He belongs to me. I am his father. Isn't this what God does to us? He gives us citizenship. He gives us the opportunity to be called his. He covers up our filth. He gives us an identity, and I love this. And what's the last thing that he has the servants give to him? Not everybody at once. Sandals. He puts shoes on his feet, right? He gives him sandals. You want to know why? Because the prodigal son, his backstory wasn't great, right? That moment was great when he was covered up, given identity, but then the father says to him, here's some shoes because you're moving forward. The best is yet to come. I'm going to put shoes on your feet because you have somewhere to go. You have giants to fight. You have steps to take. You have things to do. You are my son. I am in your corner. I will clothe you. I will give you an identity. And I will make sure that you get to move forward as long as you know who you are and whose you are. And then he celebrates his child. He gets the fattest calf, and they have a cookout to celebrate the fact that his son was lost and now he is home. But the big brother proves that haters are going to hate, right? He gets all upset. He gets mad. He says, I've been working all this time and I don't get a fatted calf. And Dad says, you just need to go out and grab one. It's like right there. Gosh, do I have to do everything for you? But the father isn't having any of that. He says, my son was lost and now he's found. This was my son's backstory, and here we are now, and guess what? He has a future. And he has a father. that's going to help him push toward his future. And as he pushes toward that future, he's going to run right through his giants. You want to know why? Because the Father already conquered him. All you got to do is cut its head off. Right? And so as I wrap up, we need to know about these kind of hidden giants in our lives, these insecurities, this self-doubt that I deal with a lot. And so when I'm up here saying this stuff, I know it sounds hypocritical because I'm fighting with it, right? I know I need to start maybe smoking what I'm selling a little bit, and I'm working on that. But the thing about it is these giants in our lives, they might be big, but they don't have the power that they think they have. But you only come to know that by knowing that your Father has the power that he says he has. That's where faith comes in. That's where belief comes in. That's where knowing who you are and whose you are comes in. You see, we were estranged from our Father for a long time. And the biggest giant of all is sin. And God sent his Son to die for us, to beat sin and hell and death, to resurrect, to give us a life so that we could be reconciled back to him. And now that we're reconciled back to him, we have the benefits of being the children of God. And as the children of God, we need to know that, yes, haters are going to hate. We also need to know that we have a backstory, that we've got to play the cards that we're dealt, but we also get to celebrate, get to walk in, get to have the confidence and the courage that we are our Father's child. And these giants in our lives, they don't stand a chance. God gives us the ability, the power, the confidence, the courage to grab them by the jaw and to beat them senseless, right? He's going to conquer them. We're just going to kill them. Father, I thank you so much. I thank you so much for the confidence that we can have in you. Not because you just are who you say you are, but because you've proven that. Because you've sent your Son to die for us, because your Son beat sin and hell and death, because we can be called your children, and we can walk with hope and confidence and courage. Father, I don't know how everybody is dealing with what they're dealing with individually. But Lord, I pray that you give them the ability to see how you've equipped them to fight their giants, how you've equipped them to watch you conquer them, and how you've equipped them to kill them. Lord, I pray that this week everybody here can walk in freedom from the fear of our insecurity, can walk in freedom from the fear of our self-doubt, and that we can hold our heads up high as your children. Lord, we love you. We thank you for your Son. It's in the name of Jesus I pray. Amen. Hey guys, a couple things. Don't forget Thursday night. I don't know what Ryan's got up his sleeve, but I'm sure it'll be awesome. Been trying my hardest to get him to learn Baby Got Back. We'll see if he can pull it off. I don't know. Down at the tap room, 7 to 9 Thursday. Also, I've done a thing. I went to a meeting the other night. We're gonna play in a volleyball league on Monday nights. If anybody's interested in playing volleyball, all right. I know you guys can't wait to see me in those super short, tight shorts, but we're gonna pull it off. Everybody's gonna throw up in their mouth a little bit. But if you are interested, there's a sign-up sheet out by the nursery check-in. Sign up. I just need your name, your social security number, major credit card, and, just your name, your phone number, and your shirt size, because I think it's going to make it super sweet sleeveless hoodies. But with polo But seriously, sign up. If we have enough, maybe we'll do 2 teams. We are playing in the lower bracket this time because I don't know how good y'all are. I know I suck. But I don't know how good y'all are. But if you're interested, that's Monday night to start September 23rd. Just let me know. So we can kind of get some on. If you guys have any questions, holler at me. I'm literally right here. Have a good week.
There's joy in the morning, springing up in my soul. There's life worth living,
Oh, I should probably turn this off so there's
'cause he calls me his own.